So good morning. Welcome to day 5. Yay, we awakened to an audio problem. There's nothing more I love at 5:30 in the morning than chasing around trying to figure out what an audio problem is. But it seems to have been fixed, let's hope, because there's no way to tell while I'm recording it. It could be 3 hours from now and I get some really bad news. It's raining again. It's pouring here in Los Angeles. I realized yesterday I was complaining about it. Well, actually I was saying how much I like the rain. But it was cold, and then I realized everybody else is under 2 feet of snow, so sorry about that. So about to get started here. Excited for a new day. I was kind of under the weather yesterday, but back in the saddle here. We have gotten, as I say, we've packed the keg full of highly explosive nitroglycerin, hopefully. And we lit the fuse yesterday. We burned the fuse all the way up to the keg. And as I said, at this point, we're building structure. I'm not really writing a screenplay right here. I'm actually writing a structure. It's like building the framing on a house. And, we'll put up the drywall and we'll paint it and we'll put the wallpaper in and we'll put the windows in and we'll put the furniture in and we'll move it all around. But you can't do that without having a structure first, and identifying indeed if there's a structure there. There's a structure there at all. And sometimes, in fact, if you try and move the furniture into the house before building the structure, it can get in the way of building the house. I mean, it's really hard to put the wallpaper up before you put the walls up. So that's why I really like to just sort of go through it, burn through it, and create the structure, create the cage. And if I can see the cage, I can see the movie. I mean, I can see the movie. I believe I can see the movie before I see the cage. But, you want something that you can hold in your hands just to make sure. So we're putting the structure together, and here we're going to continue building it here. Well, actually, I haven't built the structure, the house. I think the framework is completely built. Now we're going to blow it up. But you can't blow it up until you build it, right? So that's why we build it, so we can blow it up, because some of us like to watch things burn. So here we go. Let's go start blowing up some walls. Okay. Okie dokie. So I'm going to stop for today. It's usually a little bit less, considerably sometimes less than I usually write, but I do need to stop. I need to think about exactly what I'm doing next in this next scene. It's pretty obvious where he's going now. It is an opportunity to talk about geography and how I use geography in films. I don't always use geography. Like, obviously, a movie like Law-Abiding Citizen doesn't have any real geography because it takes place mostly in a jail, and a jail doesn't move, obviously. But movies are all about geography. Structure is another word for geography. It's the geography of the script. And what geography is it's a function of time and space. Without movement, is there time? I mean, if things don't move, if nothing changes, is there time? And can things change without geography? In other words, how do you tell that something has changed if it doesn't move? And that doesn't mean to move across space, but change itself is movement. And so, in that sense, structure is another sense of geography, because structure marks the pace of change and how things change, and the way you change things and the pace in which you change things and when you change things is an expression of geography. As I said before, I can't remember if it was in the day I erased or not, but movies are like accordions, and they expand and they contract. And That's another word for pacing, and it's another word for structure. And to me, it should be instinctual whether a scene should immediately, after you've written one scene, whether the next scene should contract, both in terms of space and emotionally, in terms of tone, in terms of volume. All of these things are geographical in a way. Volume is geographical. Whether there are explosions in one scene and none in another, that's geographical. It's pacing, it's structure, it's change, and the audience is very sensitive to the pattern and the waves and the sensitivity and the nuance in which we as screenwriters or filmmakers, we change the space. Now that's why it becomes very, very challenging to write in a movie that takes place entirely in one room or one house, because the limitations on the change of space are strict. So you have to find other very creative ways to substitute for that. Or if you film a movie in a coffin, I mean, it sounds impossible right up front, but we know Ryan Reynolds did a movie about a man in a coffin. But why does it sound impossible? Well, it sounds impossible because even subconsciously we understand how important space is and geography is to movies and into telling stories. So, long story short, I always am modulating space, hopefully in a very sensitive way. As I said, when I finish each scene, I like to think, what do I want to feel next? And that feeling is often associated with space, both in terms of physical space, but also internal space. You know, does the audience, does this character need to go inside himself? Does he need to go to his wife or her husband? How quiet is it? How much is it about the character and less about the action, etc., etc. These things in the pentameter of them are extremely important. But there's another important factor that I lop on top of that, which is part of the same thing, just a different word for it. You know, it's just like all the different forms of energy, light, sound, heat, are all expressions of the same thing, which is energy. So in addition to pacing a movie in terms of the visual space, because it's quite interesting, you know, when a person in a David Lean movie sees this massive, you know, vista, it provokes a certain grand feeling in them. But a scene in a small room, you know, where someone's dancing around cutting off someone's ear, can have just as much impact. And I find that to be quite interesting. But that doesn't mean that they provoke the same sort of emotion in the audience. And the audience is the entire reason they go to see the movies is the audience essentially, each of us is an instrument. We're an emotional instrument. And we can't go there, they're invisible on us, we are made up of emotional strings. And a really good movie plucks those strings expertly and creates, without needing to sound corny, it creates beautiful music. So on top of all these other geographical or structural elements that, you know, I am, or you have to be, I believe, conscious of it, I also tend to, lately, I've been using more and more, I've been using geography too, because, you know, unless I wrote a movie last year that's set in a house, okay, so there's not a lot of geography there. But, you know, you turn the house itself into its own map, and so that's helpful, but it's still kind of challenging. But I love to use geography. At a certain point in the script, I sort of set the audience's expectations on where it will end up, and give them an actual knowledge of where the character is beginning. So, and a really obvious example of this would be in something like a Gumball Rally movie or something like that, which involves a race across the country from Los Angeles to California. Well, right there you already have the structure of the movie. And the structure is very important on a number of reasons. A, to satisfy the movie, but also, you know, we have a ticking clock in our head where structure allows us to know where we are in the movie. I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have, you've watched movies where you're 2 hours in and you're like, is this movie ending? I can't tell. I don't know if we're close, I don't know where we are in the movie. That structure, and without having that structure, human beings get kind of nervous, and it doesn't allow them to participate as emotionally as possible in the movie. It's like if you're running in a race, but you don't know where the finish line is. It could be in a mile, it could be half a mile, it could be 20 miles. That kind of stuff really screws with your head. So anyway, so if you have the example of, say, Cannonball Run, you automatically know the structure because you know you're starting in LA, and you know by the time you get to New Jersey you're in the third act. I mean, it's so clear, you can feel it. I like to do that, not, across America, but definitely like to set up a sense of geography in the movie, so that, and where the audience, where the character, the protagonist, has a target to hit, but he has to cover distance to get there, and he has to go through obstacles on the way there, and each obstacle is in a particular place, which sets yet another structural milestone, such that when we get to the penultimate, for instance, obstacle, and we know what that is, we're also conscious of the proximity of that penultimate obstacle to the final obstacle, and therefore we understand, we're in the third act, we are in the final game here, we're in the end game, and we can feel, on top of everything else, the plot is beginning to wrap up, all the pennies have dropped, we know everything about the bad guy, we feel the final confrontation coming up, and of course, talking about an action movie, but why not? Because these are some of the simplest movies and easiest movies to understand to write, which is why I chose to writing an action film. Because other movies can be more complex and more opaque and elliptical in the way they seem to work, although fundamentally all good movies tend to work the same. There are some exceptions to that. Lawrence of Arabia is very hard to decipher. You could take an action movie to like Speed, which I believe is a 5-act movie, and it really defies any kind of act structure. But that's okay because it made up for it by just being sort of endlessly entertaining and very, very well directed all the way through. But anyway, I just wanted to put that in your ear, and you'll watch it as I go along, starting now at this point in the script. You're going to see that I start moving across. It's unusually, I've spent about 60 pages. It needs to be less here. We need to be more around page 50, 52 here. But I'll take care of that later. Again, we're just building the house, the structure of the house here. We're just doing framing. But you'll see, I'm going to start moving through both physical barriers, geographical locations, and human barriers. And those obstacles and barriers will all get bigger as we move along, and by that way, in that manner, we create escalation. Escalation, and of course, the fact that the stakes are rising each time, but also escalation in the fact that we know as we approach endgame that the movie starts moving faster, and we've gone over the hump of the roller coaster, and we're headed down the hill. So anyway, sorry about that. So hey, that's it for day 5. Fortunate Son. It's been fun. I'll probably do some writing on the weekend, but not much. I really write half days, which is only an hour or two, so I can spend some time with my family. And we'll be back at it and posting on Monday. I hope you enjoy your weekend. It's been a fun and exciting week. I have to admit, sometimes I get seized with depression and a huge self-doubt. Like, is the structure going to materialize? But I have to push forward on faith, and it always works out. And sometimes with some remodeling for sure. But again, that's all she wrote. I'll see you guys on Monday.